I spent 18 years wondering why nobody wanted me until I discovered they legally couldn't. Before we dive into this story, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow, I'm sharing something that'll completely change how you think about fate and family. My name is Claire, and I grew up at Meadowbrook Children's Home in rural Pennsylvania. 18 years in the same building, watching kids come and go while I stayed behind like forgotten furniture. Some children got adopted within months, swept up by eager families who saw potential in their bright eyes or quiet demeanor. Others took years, finally finding homes just before aging out of the system. But me? I had exactly 0 adoption attempts. Not one family even requested to meet me. The social workers tried to be kind about it. Mrs. Brennan would pat my shoulder and say things like, "Your family is still out there, Claire. Sometimes it just takes time." But after the first 5 years, even she stopped pretending. By the time I turned 13, I'd accepted the truth that seemed obvious to everyone. There was something fundamentally unwantable about me. I wasn't a difficult child. My grades were decent. I followed rules, and I never caused the kind of dramatic problems that made some kids infamous throughout the system. If anything, I was invisible. Brown hair, average height, quiet personality. Nothing that made families stop and think, "That's the one. That's our daughter." What I didn't know, what nobody told me until 3 days after my 18th birthday, was that I'd been legally unavailable for adoption my entire life. The truth came from a lawyer named Richard Morrison, who appeared at Meadowbrook on a cold March morning, carrying a briefcase and asking specifically for me. Mrs. Brennan brought me to her office, confusion written across her face, because lawyers never came to the home unless something had gone very wrong. "Claire," Mr. Morrison said, shaking my hand with unexpected warmth, "I've been your trustee since you were 6 months old. I'm here because you've reached the age specified in your parents' will." I stared at him. My parents? Thomas and Rachel Harper. They died in a farming accident when you were 4 months old. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. They left very specific instructions about your care and your inheritance. The room felt like it was tilting. I'd been told my entire life that I was abandoned at a hospital, that my parents were unknown, that I had no family. Mrs. Brennan looked as shocked as I felt. "There must be some mistake," she said. "Claire's file says—" "Claire's file was sealed by court order," Mr. Morrison interrupted gently. "Her parents owned Harper Valley Farm, 240 acres of land about 30 miles from here. When they died, they left everything to Claire with one condition. She had to be raised in institutional care until age 18, at which point she'd inherit the property free and clear." "That doesn't make sense," I whispered. "Why would they want me in an orphanage?" Mr. Morrison's expression softened with something like sympathy. "Your parents were young when they died. Your mother was 24, your father 26. They'd struggled with addiction issues before you were born, and both came from troubled families. According to the will, they were terrified that if something happened to them, their relatives would fight over you and the farm, using you as a pawn to claim the property." He pulled out a letter, its envelope yellowed with age. "Your mother wrote this for you. She explains it better than I can." My hands trembled as I took the letter. The handwriting was loopy and feminine, written on floral stationery that had faded over the years. My dearest Claire, it began, if you're reading this, then we're gone, and you're 18 years old. I'm writing this when you're 3 weeks old, watching you sleep in your bassinet while your daddy fixes the fence outside. You're perfect, baby girl. So absolutely perfect. And I'm terrified. Your father and I aren't perfect. We've made terrible mistakes, hurt people we loved, and barely escaped the chaos of our own childhoods. We got clean before you were born, worked so hard to build a life worth living. But we know how fragile that is. We know that addiction runs in families like a curse, and we know our relatives would use you to get this farm if anything happened to us. So we made a choice that breaks my heart, but feels like the only way to protect you. If we die before you're grown, you'll go into the state system. Not to my sister who'd sell the farm for drug money. Not to your father's brother who'd run it into the ground with gambling debts. You'll go somewhere safe, somewhere they can't touch you, and you'll stay there until you're old enough to fight for yourself. The farm will wait for you. Mr. Morrison will make sure of it, and when you're 18, it'll be yours completely. No strings, no relatives with claims, no one who can take it from you. We're setting up a trust that'll maintain the property and pay the taxes until you're ready. I know you'll be angry. I know you'll feel abandoned. But please understand, we're doing this because we love you more than anything. This farm is your birthright, your future, and we won't let anyone steal it from you, even if protecting it means breaking our own hearts. Come home, Claire. Come see what we built for you. The house is filled with love, even if we're not there to show you. Every fence post your daddy set, every garden bed I planted, it was all for you, always for you. Love forever, Mom. Tears streamed down my face, smudging the old ink. My parents had wanted me. They'd loved me enough to make an impossible choice, sacrificing their own dream of raising me to ensure I'd have something no one could take away. The farm has been maintained by a property management company funded through the trust. Mr. Morrison continued, it's been leased to neighboring farmers who've kept it productive. There's approximately $93,000 remaining in the trust after taxes and management fees, which will transfer to you along with the property. $93,000, 240 acres, a house I'd never seen where parents I couldn't remember had once loved me. It felt like inheriting someone else's life. Why didn't anyone tell me, I asked, anger cutting through the grief. 18 years, I thought nobody wanted me. Mrs. Brennan looked stricken. I didn't know, Claire. Your file just said special circumstances, adoption prohibited by court order. I thought it was maybe a criminal case or something that made you ineligible. I never imagined. Your parents wanted you to grow up without the weight of knowing, Mr. Morrison said quietly. They worried that if you knew about the farm, you'd spend your childhood counting down days instead of just being a child. They wanted you to have as normal a life as possible under the circumstances. Normal. 18 years of feeling fundamentally unwanted was their idea of normal. But as I sat there holding my mother's letter, I couldn't fully hate them for it. They'd been kids themselves, terrified, and doing the best they could with impossible choices. When can I see it? I asked. The farm. Whenever you're ready. I can drive you out there this afternoon if you'd like. I looked at Mrs. Brennan, who nodded through her own tears. Go, honey. Go see what's yours. The drive to Harper Valley Farm took 40 minutes through increasingly rural landscape. We passed other farms, their fields still brown from winter, with early spring planting just beginning. Mr. Morrison filled the silence with practical information about property values, agricultural leases, and legal documents I'd need to sign, but I barely heard him. My mind was spinning with 18 years of memories viewed through a completely different lens. Every time I'd watched another kid leave with their new family, I'd felt the sting of rejection. But they'd been allowed to leave. I hadn't, not because I was unwanted, but because I was too wanted, by parents who'd loved me enough to give me up. We turned onto a gravel driveway, marked by a weathered wooden sign, Harper Valley Farm. My heart hammered as we drove past fields, a large red barn, and several outbuildings before the house came into view. It was a two-story farmhouse, white with green shutters, exactly like something from a storybook. A wraparound porch held a swing that swayed gently in the breeze. Flower beds, overgrown but still showing signs of careful planting, bordered the foundation. This was home. This was what my parents had built for me. Mr. Morrison handed me a set of keys. "Take your time. I'll wait in the car." I climbed the porch steps, my footsteps echoing on old wood. The key turned smoothly in the lock, and the door swung open to reveal a furnished interior covered in dust. Sheets. Someone had clearly maintained the house. No water damage, no broken windows, everything preserved and waiting. I pulled dust sheets off furniture, revealing a cozy living room with a stone fireplace, comfortable couches, and bookshelves filled with farming manuals and novels. The kitchen had butcher block counters, white cabinets, and a window over the sink that looked out over the back fields. Everything was dated, clearly untouched since my parents died 18 years ago, but it was clean and well kept, frozen in time. Upstairs, I found 3 bedrooms. The master bedroom held a queen bed, dresser, and framed photos on the nightstand. I picked up one picture and saw a young couple, barely adults themselves, grinning at the camera with a tiny baby between them. My parents, me. My mother had dark curly hair and my exact same gray eyes. My father had a wide smile and hands that looked like they knew hard work. They looked happy. They looked like people who'd fought for that happiness and won, at least for a little while. The second bedroom was clearly meant to be mine. The walls were painted soft yellow, and though there was no furniture, someone had painted a mural of farm animals on one wall: a cow, a horse, chickens, and a pig, all smiling in a child's storybook style. My father's work, maybe, imagining the daughter who'd one day sleep here. I sat on the floor of that empty yellow room and cried. Not angry tears anymore, but something more complicated. Grief for parents I'd never known, relief that I'd been wanted all along, and overwhelming sadness for everything we'd all lost. What comes next is something I never saw coming. Stick with me and make sure you subscribe. After sitting in that yellow bedroom until my tears dried, I explored the rest of the house. In the attic, I found boxes carefully labeled with my name: Claire's baby clothes, Claire's toys, Claire's future. Inside were tiny outfits my mother had saved, stuffed animals, and even a baby book documenting my first months. First smile, 6 weeks. First laugh, 2 months. Loves when Daddy sings to her. They documented everything as if trying to create memories I could someday discover. There were photos of them holding me in the hospital, bringing me home to this house, showing me the barn and animals. In every picture, they looked at me like I was the answer to every prayer they'd ever made. I also found journals, both my mother's and father's, chronicling their journey from addiction to recovery, their decision to buy the farm, and their desperate attempts to build a stable life. My mother's entries were raw and honest about her fears. "I'm terrified every day that I'll mess this up," she wrote when I was 2 weeks old, "that I'll fall back into old patterns and destroy this perfect little person who trusts me completely. My sister called today asking for money, and I wanted to send it so badly, wanted to fix her like people tried to fix me. But Tom reminded me that enabling her helps no one. We have to protect Claire first, always Claire first." My father's entries were shorter but equally revealing. He wrote about repairing fences, planting crops, and his determination to make the farm successful enough to support his family. He also wrote about his fears of his brother showing up, of their past catching up with them. His final entry was dated 2 days before they died. "Claire smiled at me today while I was singing. Rachel says I can't carry a tune to save my life, but our daughter doesn't care. She just loves the sound of her daddy's voice. Everything we've been through, every hard choice, every sacrifice, it's worth it for moments like this. We're building something good here, something that'll last." 2 days later, a piece of equipment malfunctioned while they were working together in the barn. Both died before emergency services could reach the remote farm. I was 4 months old, napping in the house, found hours later by a neighbor who'd come to check on them. The property management company had kept excellent records. For 18 years, neighboring farms had leased the land, planting corn and soybeans, maintaining the fields, and paying rent that funded the trust. The barn held equipment my parents had owned, a tractor, tools, everything needed to run an actual farm. But I knew nothing about farming. I'd grown up in an institutional setting, learning skills that helped me survive group living, not agricultural life. Still, as I explored the property over the following days, something stirred inside me. This land was mine. My parents had literally died working it, trying to build something permanent for me. Walking away felt like betraying their sacrifice. Mr. Morrison helped me navigate the legal process of officially claiming the inheritance. I signed dozens of documents, met with banks to establish accounts, and learned about property taxes and agricultural exemptions. The property management company offered to continue their services, but I declined. If I was going to own a farm, I needed to actually farm it. The neighboring farmer who'd been leasing the land, a man named George Patterson, came to introduce himself a week after I moved into the farmhouse. He was in his 50s, weathered by sun and work, with kind eyes that reminded me of how my father looked in photos. "Your parents were good people," George said, sitting at my kitchen table with coffee I'd nervously prepared. "Young, maybe a little in over their heads with farm life, but they worked hard and treated people right." I was sorry to hear what happened. "Did you know them well?" I asked, hungry for any information about the strangers who were my parents. "Well enough. Your daddy helped me fix my combine one summer. Wouldn't take any payment for it. Said neighbors help neighbors. Your mama had the best vegetable garden in the county. She'd bring us tomatoes and squash, always refusing money because, as she said, gardens grow more than any family can eat alone." He studied me carefully. "You planning to work this land yourself or sell it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know anything about farming." George nodded slowly. Land like this, good soil, reliable water, it's worth a lot of money. You could sell it to developers, walk away with enough cash to set yourself up nice somewhere else. Nobody would blame you. But? But your parents loved this farm. Saw it as redemption, I think. A chance to prove they could build something good. Seems a shame to let that go without at least trying to understand what they saw in it. His words stayed with me. That night, I sat on the porch swing my parents had installed, looking out over fields bathed in moonlight, and made a decision. I was going to try. Even if I failed, even if I eventually had to sell, I owed it to them to at least attempt to understand what they'd built. George became my teacher, along with his wife Susan and their 2 adult children, who helped run their larger operation. They taught me about soil testing, crop rotation, planting schedules, and the endless maintenance that farming demanded. I was terrible at first, making mistakes that must have driven George crazy, though he never showed frustration. Farming isn't something you learn from books, he told me after I accidentally planted an entire field of corn too deep. It's something you learn by doing, and doing it wrong, and then doing it better next year. Your parents made plenty of mistakes their first seasons. You will too. That's normal. I also hired a part-time farmhand, a young guy named Marcus, who was working his way through community college. He was studying agricultural business and needed practical experience, so it worked out perfectly. Together, we brought the farm back to life beyond what the property management company had maintained. The house slowly transformed from a museum to my parents' memory into an actual home. I kept most of their furniture, but added my own touches. Photos from my childhood at Meadowbrook went up alongside their pictures, creating a visual story of our separated lives finally coming together. In the yellow bedroom they'd prepared for me, I set up an office where I could study farming techniques and manage the business side of the operation. Mrs. Brennan visited once I was settled, walking through the house with tears in her eyes. "All those years," she whispered, "all those years you thought nobody wanted you, and this was here waiting." "They wanted me," I said, and finally meant it without anger. "They just wanted me to be safe more than they wanted me with them. That's love, I think, the hardest kind." The first harvest was modest. We'd leased most of the land to George again while I learned, keeping just 20 acres for my own crops. But watching soybeans I'd planted break through soil, then grow, then mature into a harvestable crop, created a satisfaction I'd never experienced. This was creation. This was legacy. This was everything my parents had worked for. I found their graves in a small cemetery about 5 miles from the farm. Simple headstones that read Thomas Harper, beloved father, and Rachel Harper, beloved mother. Someone, probably Mr. Morrison from the trust, had maintained the plots over the years. I brought flowers and sat between their graves, talking to them like they could hear. "I'm trying," I told them. "I'm learning to farm, learning to make this work. I'm angry sometimes that you chose this path, that I grew up thinking I was unwanted. But I understand why you did it. You were protecting me the only way you knew how." A breeze rustled through the cemetery trees, and for just a moment I let myself imagine it was them responding, telling me they were proud, that I was doing exactly what they'd hoped for. By my second year on the farm, things were stabilizing. I'd expanded my own operation to 50 acres, started a small vegetable garden that I sold at the local farmer's market, and even bought 3 dairy cows that Marcus helped me care for. The farm wasn't making me rich, but it was profitable enough to live on, especially supplemented by leasing the remaining acreage to George. I also started volunteering at Meadowbrook, talking to older kids about my experience, not to give them false hope that they'd all inherit farms, but to remind them that their worth wasn't determined by whether someone chose to adopt them. Some of the most damaged kids there opened up to me in ways they wouldn't with the social workers, seeing me as proof that life could work out okay, even when the system felt hopeless. One girl, a 15-year-old named Ashley, who'd been in care since she was 7, asked me, "Do you ever wish they'd just kept you? That they'd risked their families getting the farm if it meant you grew up with parents?" I considered the question carefully. Sometimes, I admitted, but then I think about the alternative. If their relatives had fought over me and this land, I might have ended up raised by people struggling with addiction, or worse. Maybe I wouldn't have had consistent schooling, consistent meals, consistent safety. The system isn't perfect, but at Meadowbrook, I was safe. And now I have this. I gestured to encompass the farm. My parents gave me both safety and inheritance. That's more than a lot of kids get. Ashley nodded slowly, processing. So it's okay that I wasn't adopted? That I'll age out like you did? It's okay to grieve what you didn't get, I said. I did. I still do sometimes. But that grief doesn't have to define your whole life. You get to decide what comes next, just like I did. On the 3rd anniversary of my 18th birthday, the anniversary of learning the truth about my parents, I held a small gathering at the farm. George and Susan came, along with Marcus, who'd become a genuine friend, Mrs. Brennan, and a few staff from Meadowbrook, and Mr. Morrison, who'd made this all possible. We ate food grown on the farm, drank cider from the apple trees my mother had planted, and celebrated not just the property, but everything it represented. Second chances, complicated love, the idea that sometimes the hardest choices are made by people who care the most. Your parents would be proud, Mr. Morrison said, raising his glass in a toast. They hoped you'd come here, claim this place, and build a life. But I don't think even they could have imagined how beautifully you've honored their memory. Standing on my porch, surrounded by people who'd helped me build this new life, looking out over fields I'd learned to tend, I felt something I'd never experienced during those 18 years at Meadowbrook. I felt like I belonged, not because someone had chosen me, but because I'd chosen myself, because I'd decided that the complicated legacy my parents left was worth fighting for, worth learning about, worth transforming into something living and real. The farm my parents built was waiting for me all along. But it took 18 years of feeling unwanted to fully appreciate what they'd given up so I could have it. That's the painful arithmetic of love sometimes. People sacrifice their own happiness for yours, and you don't understand the gift until you're old enough to recognize what it cost them. I never got adopted because I didn't need to be. I was always claimed, always wanted, always destined for this exact place. It just took me 18 years to come home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever discovered something about your past that completely changed how you saw your life? Share your story with our community. and check out the other videos on screen for more incredible stories about family, inheritance, and finding where you truly belong.